The morning sun cast a golden hue over the meticulously manicured lawns of Maplewood Estates, painting a picture of suburban bliss that belied the tension simmering beneath its surface. This was a neighborhood where the air smelled of freshly baked cookies and freshly cut grass, where the hum of sprinklers was the soundtrack of life, and where every mailbox was a silent sentinel of order. And in the midst of it all was Karen. She was the self-appointed queen of the neighborhood, the watchdog of unwritten rules, the guardian of aesthetic perfection. Her eyes were as sharp as a hawk's, always seeking out the slightest deviation from the norm, ready to pounce on any infraction with the fervor of a zealot. Her reign over the homeowners association was absolute, masked under a veneer of concern for the community's well-being. It started with the small things. A note slipped under my door, its edges neatly creased, the handwriting precise, almost mechanical. "Your trash bins were left out an hour too long." A gentle reminder, one might think, but beneath its polite phrasing lay an unspoken threat, a silent assertion of her power. I knew it was her. It always was. I read the note and smiled wryly. There was no need to confront her. No reason to disturb the fragile peace of this suburban paradise over a matter so trivial. I placed the note on the kitchen counter, a testament to her overzealous nature, and went on with my day. My world was larger than her petty kingdom, my time too valuable to squander on such trivialities. But then came the paint, a soft, muted blue, chosen carefully to accentuate the lines of the house, to bring a bit of the sky down to earth, a color that spoke of tranquility, of calm breezes and open horizons. The day after the painters finished, another note appeared, this time taped to the front door. "Non-compliant color choice. Must repaint within 2 weeks." The words were tight with authority, bolstered by the weight of bylaws and regulations. It was laughable. Really, the notion that a shade of blue could incite such fervor, could become a battleground for control. I kept the note next to the first, a growing collection of her attempts to bind the neighborhood with invisible chains. My response was simple. Nothing. Silence was my shield, and patience my ally. The color stayed, a refusal to bend to her whims. But Karen was unrelenting, her actions escalating like a storm gathering strength. She enlisted her band of enforcers, an assembly of like-minded residents who shared her penchant for order and conformity. They patrolled the neighborhood with clipboards and measuring tapes, inspecting lawns and hedges, meting out warnings like traffic tickets. They were the fake HOA cops, a self-styled brigade of suburban justice. Yet, through it all, I remained unmoved. My life was the quiet eye of the hurricane, untouched by the chaos she sought to impose. I had seen true storms, faced challenges that dwarfed her petty crusades. This was but a game, and I had no intention of playing. My daughter, though she was the sunbeam in my life, her laughter more valuable than any neighborhood edict. She was innocent of this conflict, unaware that she had become a target in Karen's misguided quest for dominion. The assault came unexpectedly, a crescendo in Karen's desperate symphony. The fake HOA cops approached her, their demeanor brimming with self-importance, their intentions masked by a facade of concern. When they laid hands on her, their motives became clear, a grotesque distortion of authority that awakened a sleeping giant within me. They had no idea, no notion of the world they were about to unravel, the force they had inadvertently provoked. But that's a story for the next act. The morning sun filtered through the blinds, casting striped shadows across the living room floor, a peaceful illusion shattered by the memory of the previous day's events. My daughter had come home with a bruised arm, and a story that twisted my stomach in knots. Fake HOA cops, a pair of self-appointed guardians of neighborhood sanctity, whose armor was nothing more than clipboards wielded with misguided authority and a sense of self-importance that bordered on delusion. I was still processing when I noticed Karen, the self-proclaimed queen of the cul-de-sac, circling our property like a carrion crow. Her presence was as unwelcome as a thorn bush in a rose garden. Yet she seemed to thrive on the chaos she sowed. Karen had a knack for creating rules as arbitrary as they were punitive, spun from a web of whispered gossip and half-truths. The citation arrived early, folded neatly and slipped under our door as if it were an innocuous love note. Unkempt lawn, it announced in bold, accusing letters. I surveyed the yard, its grass trimmed to regulation length. But Karen's standards were as mercurial as spring weather. Perhaps a single, rebellious dandelion had dared to sprout overnight. The offenses multiplied like a series of unfortunate events. A garden gnome, innocent and cheery, was deemed an eyesore. Our mailbox, slightly tilted after a winter storm, was apparently an affront to the neighborhood's aesthetic harmony. Each citation was a raindrop in a gathering storm, threatening to flood the facade of civility Karen so desperately maintained. I imagined her sitting at her kitchen table, pen poised like a dagger, ready to carve out another piece of spiteful bureaucracy. She had the eyes of a hawk and the soul of a bureaucrat. Yet, I bided my time, letting the absurdity play out. Sometimes, the best strategy is to watch and wait. Things took a turn when whispers began to circulate. The neighborhood grapevine, tangled and thorny, was alive with speculation. "Did you hear?" they'd ask. Voices hushed and conspiratorial. About her daughter, how she was accosted. The words slithered through the streets like a snake in tall grass, winding their way into every household. I caught glimpses of Karen with her minions, their heads bent together like witches over a cauldron. They concocted stories with relish, each tale more outrageous than the last. My daughter's ordeal was twisted into a narrative of rebellion, of teenage delinquency. It was a clever move, to redirect the community's gaze, to obscure her own misdeeds. But the truth was a stubborn weed. It rooted itself deep, resilient against the forces conspiring to bury it. I knew it was only a matter of time before it broke through the surface. In the quiet of the night, as the neighborhood slumbered beneath a blanket of stars, I pondered my next move. Karen didn't know who she was dealing with. I was no mere pawn in her game. I was the father of a daughter wronged, and the tide was about to turn. Vengeance, like justice, is best served with patience and precision. As I mapped out my strategy, a small, satisfied smile played on my lips. Karen had unleashed a tempest, but she had no idea the storm that was headed her way. In the pale light of dawn, I sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by the quiet hum of early morning stillness. The world outside was waking slowly, oblivious to the tempest brewing within. In front of me, a pile of neatly organized papers and a steaming mug of coffee. Evidence, documentation, cold hard truths staring back at me. My daughter, brave and defiant, had recounted every ugly detail of her encounter with the so-called HOA cops. Her voice, steady but edged with a tremor of injustice, echoed in my mind as I meticulously cataloged each point: their false authority, the intimidation, the bruise on her arm, a shameful badge of their cowardice. I had taken photos, carefully ensuring each image captured not just the injury, but the betrayal. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words, but in moments like these, images could scream louder than any protest. I had a plan, a quiet, methodical approach: revenge. They say, is a dish best served cold? I intended to serve it on ice. With each piece of documentation, I envisioned the ripples of consequence. The HOA board, an insidious blend of misguided power and petty bureaucracy, would be my first target. The irony was not lost on me self-proclaimed enforcers of community harmony, yet blind to the discord, festering under their noses. I drafted carefully worded letters, intertwining fact with a subtle weave of emotion, language that spoke more in nuance than in rage. Let them wonder. Let them sweat. The language of the law is cold, but my words were crafted to burn as they unfolded. a quiet symphony of impending accountability. The pen paused in my hand, hovering above the paper. A fleeting thought crossed my mind, as sharp and clear as the dawn breaking outside. These HOA cops, they had never considered the consequences. To them, my daughter was just another resident to bully into submission, an oversight that would cost them dearly. I sealed the letters, each envelope a silent promise. The coffee had grown cold, but I savored its bitterness, a reflection of the resolve simmering beneath my calm exterior. The sound of footsteps on the stairs signaled my daughter's approach, her presence a reminder of why this mattered. She deserved justice. She deserved to see that no matter how grand the facade, lies crumble under the weight of truth. The day unfolded, inching towards an inevitability orchestrated with precision and patience. The neighborhood, blissfully unaware of the drama quietly unraveling in its midst, went about its usual rhythm. Children played, cars rolled lazily by, and neighbors engaged in their mundane rituals, a veneer of tranquility on the cusp of disruption. I delivered the letters, slipping them one by one into the indifferent mouths of mailboxes, each thud a heartbeat, a steady reminder of the storm gathering beyond their awareness. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across suburban lawns, I stood at my window, watching, waiting. The anticipation was a living thing, coiled tightly within. The night fell silently, a calm before the reckoning. Tomorrow, the HOA would meet. Tomorrow, the scales would tip. My daughter would see that justice, though sometimes delayed, was inevitable. The morning would bring resolution, or perhaps a step towards it. Either way, it would mark the beginning of the end for those who had overstepped. In the silence of the night, I allowed myself a quiet smile. They had no idea who her father was, but soon they would. The sunlight crept through the blinds, slicing the room into a pattern of light and shadow. It was early morning, and the world outside was quiet enough to hear the whisper of leaves brushing against the window, a deceptive kind of peace. I thought, as I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the folder before me. Inside were the fruits of my quiet labor, weeks of research, consultations with legal experts, and carefully crafted letters, each document a stepping stone in a journey of precise retribution. I had no need for grand gestures or loud declarations. Power whispered. It did not shout. I glanced at my daughter's closed bedroom door. Her sleep had been restless since that day, her dreams tangled with the residue of fear. The so-called HOA cops had not merely crossed a line, they had erased it, leaving a scar on innocence. But scars, I knew, had their own stories to tell. I flipped through the folder, names and addresses of the HOA members, their bylaws, financial records meticulously dissected. It was amazing what a person could uncover with a curious mind and some time. Secrets they thought buried beneath layers of bureaucracy, now laid bare. I had prepared an array of legal instruments, each one a subtle scalpel designed to cut away the rot, formal complaints filed with the proper authorities, highlighting the impersonation and the violation of civil liberties, a lawsuit, not for vengeance, but for justice. A spotlight turned on their hidden dealings, a pressure they wouldn't escape unscathed. Irony danced in the corners of my mind as I imagined their faces, the realization that they had tangled with someone who understood the game far better than they did. They had mistaken compliance for weakness, bureaucracy for a shield. Yet, they had forgotten that laws were not just words on paper, but a force that could be wielded by those who knew how. Coffee cooled in my mug, untouched as I reviewed the final document, a letter, drafted with meticulous care, destined for the local media, a narrative crafted to highlight a community in distress, its leaders caught in a scandal of their own making. It was a story eager to unfold, a truth waiting to resonate beyond the confines of our little neighborhood. The clock ticked softly, marking time as I sealed envelopes, each one a weapon in a silent arsenal. I felt a quiet satisfaction in the methodical nature of my actions, each decision a note in a symphony of consequence, composed in the privacy of my own mind. I stood, collecting the folder and its contents. The day was beginning, the world waking to its routine rotations, but I moved with purpose. Each step, a deliberate choice in my path to restore balance. The false guardians of our community had written their own downfall with arrogance and ignorance. Now, they would face a truth crafted by their own hands and my quiet resolve. As I reached for the door, a memory flashed my daughter's wide eyes. Searching for reassurance, I whispered a promise to the empty room, a vow that the storm would pass, leaving strength in its wake. Hope hung in the air, fragile yet unyielding. The door closed softly behind me, and the path forward stretched clear. The quiet of the morning was deceptive. It settled over the neighborhood like a soft fog, trying to hide the chaos that brewed underneath. The sun stained the horizon with burnt orange, a thin line of fire stretching across the sky. It was a gentle reminder that a new day had begun. Yet, the air tasted of unfinished business. My daughter sat at the kitchen table, her eyes tracing the patterns in the wood grain. She hadn't spoken much since the incident. Her usual lively chatter dulled to silence. There was something fragile about her now. As if words might shatter some delicate balance she clung to. I watched her, feeling the weight of my inadequacy pressing down like an anchor. Fathers are supposed to protect their children from the world's injustices, yet here we were, scarred by the very community meant to shelter us. Karen's influence had spread through our neighborhood like bindweed, choking out dissent and twisting the fabric of our lives. Her self-appointed authority, a self-righteous tyranny masquerading as community service, had reached its zenith with the assault on my daughter. The fake HOA cops, emboldened by her blessing, had stepped beyond their boundaries, and in doing so, unraveled the facade Karen had so carefully constructed. I took a deep breath, feeling the cool air fill my lungs. It was time to act, to peel back the layers of deceit and expose the rotten core. My decision had been made the moment my daughter stumbled home, shaken but resolute in her recounting of the night's events. These pretenders, this mockery of power, would not stand unchallenged. Action began with a knock on the door, firm, deliberate, the kind of knock that demands attention and promises resolution. The sound seemed to echo through the house, threading through my thoughts with a clarity that dispelled the morning fog. I answered it, feeling the stirrings of justice beginning to thread through the day. Outside stood a figure, familiar yet unexpected, a true face of authority dressed in the uniform of the law, real cops, not the self-fashioned guardians of suburban order. There was no need for words. A simple nod passed between us, a silent understanding that justice was overdue. We moved together through the neighborhood, drawing gazes from behind curtains and half-open doors. The community watched, their eyes following the procession with a mixture of curiosity and anticipation. Karen had made her kingdom of conformity and fear. But today, it would be held accountable. It was fitting, perhaps, that we found her in her garden, pruning roses with a meticulous hand. The scene was almost idyllic, a snapshot of domesticity that belied the turmoil she had sown. She looked up as we approached, and for a brief moment, I saw the flicker of surprise in her eyes, a crack in the porcelain mask she wore. There's a power in silence, in allowing actions to speak louder than words. As the handcuffs clicked into place, a hush settled over the street, the kind of quiet that follows the breaking of a storm. Karen's gaze met mine, a mixture of defiance and disbelief. In that look, I saw the recognition of her miscalculation, a realization that her self-made authority was as hollow as the promises she peddled. With Karen's removal, the neighborhood began to breathe again. It was a slow process. Like the first shoots of green breaking through winter's hold, conversations resumed, tentative at first, then gaining strength as trust began to rebuild. My daughter found her voice again, laughter slowly returning. to color her days. Reputation and reality had finally aligned, the truth carving a clear path through the lies. As the neighborhood healed, a new sense of community emerged, one built on understanding and shared experiences. Karen's reign had ended, replaced by a quieter, more genuine leadership. In the end, it was not just about retribution or justice served. It was about reclaiming our lives, about finding strength in unity rather than division. And as I watched my daughter play beneath the open sky, I knew that we were finally free.